I am. Okay, I'm recording Ashley. Is it Bermel? Bermel?
Bermel, yeah.
Bermel? Okay, perfect. I actually got it right. I usually totally butcher it. So I'm welcoming Ashley to the podcast. This is another one of those situations where I have literally spent maybe 2 minutes talking to you in our entire lives, like in real
Yeah,
life.
actually,
Yeah.
you know what? It might have been a little, I was sitting behind you about a year ago before COVID, when Tanya had the mood
That's right.
board, not mood board, goodness gracious.
Uh,
What is it called? Vision board
Vision
thing.
board. Yeah, I'm like, it's
Yeah.
right there. I can see it.
Yeah, no, it was like right before everything went to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah. That was the first vision board I'd ever made, ever. And
Really?
I was really anti vision boards. I was like, I just don't understand how a magazine clipping is going to help me. Well, first of all, it was interesting that the things that were on that vision board, those goals looked a whole lot different as the year went on because it was, 2020. Um,
Right.
but I was like, wow, that really is helpful to have that in front of your face all the time. Okay.
So I went to, I promise not to take you on too many dives
It's
down
okay. I like the
our
dives. The
conversations,
dives
but
are good.
Home Goods in Cedar Rapids, I think, is one of the best Home Goods ever. And they had this vision board on glass that you could it was framed so you could hang it on your wall. And it was broken down into family, health, work. And I would write on it with a dry
Dry
erase
erase.
marker, and I put it next to my bed, and I kind of forgot about it. And my husband would call it like my woo-woo board. He was like, this is just weird. Like, why are we doing that? But it's so bizarre because the numbers I didn't even think about. And then a year later, I look back and I'm like, oh my God, it was amazing, like how things synced up. So then in my mind, I'm like, it was kind of one of those like self-fulfilling prophecies, so to speak. But
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just
Yeah.
my,
I forgot that you were there at that
yeah.
situation. That was really fun.
Well,
Okay, so awesome. We have actually had conversations before. I just don't remember anything.
oh no, I mean, trust me, like I sat behind you. So unless you were like this the whole time, how would you have known?
I was a little bit because one of the girls, I think Jill, that was at your table, she shared a lot. She had a lot she was, I mean, good. I'm saying that
Yeah.
not like Jill talked the entire time, but she had a lot of good things to share. So I did turn around quite a bit. Well, okay. So now we know that we actually do know each other more than we think we do. And so tell everybody, like, what do you do? What are you passionate about? Like, talk a little bit about your business to get started.
Yeah. So, full disclosure, I'm dealing with a bad sinus infection. So I don't normally sound like this and I'm not as nasally and gross. But yeah, I'm Ashley. I have a family of two young girls, a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old, and my husband. And we live in North Liberty, which it's kind of funny. My husband and I moved from Chicago. We were living smack dab in the heart of the city. And I was 8.5 months pregnant. And one day I was on the L and no one would give me their seat. And I mean, I wasn't pregnant. I was like pregnant.
Wow.
So I was like, in my hormonal range, we're going to move to Iowa where I don't have to deal with people that are not courteous and kind. This is how we're raising our kids. And my husband just allowed me to go on my hormonal rage, pack the car, and we found our first rental in North Liberty.
Are you
Signed
from
up.
here or either
No,
of you? What?
no. My husband is from Muscatine.
Okay. So
My
he's got
parents
roots in
went to
Iowa.
University of Iowa.
Okay.
That's where they met. My mom's from Dubuque. So I spent summers going to Dubuque. I went to Laura's college sports camp. But Iowa just did not, to me, seem like, it had gotten tainted by reality. It just feels like when you come here, people are kind and they're, good, and they have these passions that are outside of the real world. Like people are into woodworking, and it just seemed like I was going back in time a little bit when I visited. So
Well, and you said you went to high school in Jersey?
oh my God, yeah. Well, I move around a lot, but whole other story. But anyways, so as I digress, we moved here, and prior to me living in Iowa, I was in real estate. And as you can imagine, when you move in real estate, you lose your book of business because it's not
Right.
like you can man that ship from afar. So I went into business originally here with Skogman Homes, worked up in Cedar Rapids, built a book of business for about 5 years and worked predominantly on the new construction side. And then about a year ago, I partnered with a dear friend, Anne, in North Liberty, and we're one of the first teams that really covers Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. And we're really passionate about bringing back just that feeling of warmth and emotion and family back to real estate. You know, our clients, we treat them like family, and, you know, the two of us, it's just us. So
How'd you get into real estate to begin with? Because that's, you know, a lot of people do get into it, but staying in it it'll eat you up alive.
yeah, no, it's kind of a funny story. So when I was at school in Ohio, I had a love of art and architecture, and I really wanted to be an architect. So I had studied abroad, and my architecture professor was like, "You're not really serious about becoming an architect, are you?" I was like, "Why would you say that to me?" He's like, "Ashley, you're so hyperactive. I cannot see you sitting at a desk for more than like 20 minutes. This is, you know, not for you." So I was like, "What am I going to do, you know, with my love of architecture if I'm not practicing architecture?" And he's like, "Well, why didn't you go into real estate?" So I got a job right out of college working for the country's largest home builder, and worked there for a couple of years, and then got into real estate from that point.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah,
What is your degree in? So what did you graduate
the
with?
history of architecture,
Oh, okay.
which
Oh,
is like,
interesting.
I'm surprised that like that exists from the standpoint of, you know, there's not like an Indeed platform that says like, here's historians of architecture jobs that make, you know.
Well, I feel like you'd make a great blogger.
I mean, I suppose, but yeah, I mean, it was a bit interesting to explain to my parents that I was going to get a school or a degree in that. You know, of course, I loved art as well and wanted to maybe work in a gallery, but you make the same amount as someone that waits tables in New York.
Oh God.
And I don't know. I was on my own, and I was like, I'm not gonna even try to go there
So
at this point.
I think we've been talking for like 5 minutes maybe, and I've already counted 4 states that you've lived in.
Yeah, no, I've lived in Ohio, New Jersey, Chicago, well, Illinois, and Iowa. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say Chicago, because Chicago and Illinois are two places, different places.
Well, it's kind of funny because I was born and raised for a period of time in the heart of the city. And then we moved to the burbs. But sometimes people say I'm from Chicago, but they're really from like 90 miles away.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Like, you know, I can't imagine someone's going to know whatever small town you're from, but it's truly not Chicago. And it's
Yeah.
just kind of one of those funny things that people chuckle about.
My sister just moved to Chicago, and she's getting married this fall to a guy that was born and raised in Chicago. And she's currently living pretty close to downtown, you know, even in the industrial apartment, you know, situation.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like very cool. It's but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And, you know, pretty much to his family, her husband or future husband's family or fiance's family, like pretty much anything outside of like, you know, 20, 30 miles outside of Chicago is no longer Chicago. Like they're like, no, that's like the country now.
Well, it's so funny because my husband and I were like, with traffic as it is in Iowa City, it can kind of be in some ways like a suburb of Chicago, because us getting downtown and the 3.5 hours that it takes is in some cases similar to the commute that people endure from places like Geneva, St. Charles, if you get into, you know, the wrong commute pattern. But
Right.
I don't know if they're going to experience that with post-COVID world and what that's like, but we kind of had a chuckle about that.
Right. No kidding. So so were you pregnant with your first daughter when you moved here?
Yeah.
And then you went and had another one just right away, just got it over with, huh?
Oh God, no, it wasn't like we planned that at all. No, my husband and I joke that our motto is we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And we weren't trying or not trying. It just kind of happened, but it's the best blessing ever because both my daughters are best of friends. And,
Yeah.
you know, getting out of the diaper phase and out of the bottle phase at the same exact time can kind of be a blessing.
Yeah, my sister has twins. One of my sisters has twins, and so she kind of had the same thing with them, you know, and when they're close together. I have a cousin that had Irish twins. Well, first she had actual twins, No. First she had Irish twins and then she had actual twins. And I asked her which was worse. And she said it was having them a year apart that was worse, because like one is attached to you 24/7 and the other one is on top of the refrigerator. Like, you're like, I don't know what to do. At least when they're the same age, they're like, you can corral them together.
Right.
And
And
yeah,
it's kind of, I mean, it's fun in every way, shape, or form. But I always say, if I have a little craziness in my old age, it's because I endured those first couple of years of dealing with the close baby toddler
And were
age.
you working as a real estate agent at the same time?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot.
Yeah. Do you look back and wonder how you did it?
Yes. And I feel like I need to do one of those like celebrity apologies, where it's like, so sorry for all that. Cause I had raging postpartum and didn't know it. And
Sure.
my husband's job, he is a project manager for a wind project. So his projects are
Wow.
predominantly out of Iowa. So he would be gone, for 2 weeks out of the month. And so it was like a raging lunatic unchecked. And there were times when, I look back and I'm like, wow, okay, so that
Wow.
happened. But, it's just one of those things where after you have a baby and those hormones are there, you're kind of like driving under the influence, you're
Yeah.
really not operating a full deck of cards. But I think it's great because it gave me such a amount of empathy and understanding. All women go through so many different seasons of change when they have a baby. It's not just like you have this baby and your body's done. I mean,
Yeah.
you definitely have this period of time, almost like the 9 months after having the baby, that are just as critical as the time that you're actually pregnant.
And then trying to do it from home, working, as a real estate agent from wherever you happen to be at the time.
Right.
It doesn't really matter if you're, breastfeeding a child or you are, at a play date or whatever. You're working the kind of business that you have to respond to fires all the time. And then your husband's gone too. Like, yeah, I'm not really sure how you did that. That's amazing. But I think sometimes you're so capable of things in the moment that you would never plan to do, but here you are, you figure it out. Right. And that's just how it has to go. So have you liked living in Iowa, and was it a big transition, or were you just,
I love it.
good?
I absolutely love it. I really truly feel like this is the best place on the planet.
Wow, that's awesome.
The people that I've met here are from all walks of life. And I think that, it's kind of like the best kept secret, in the sense that, yes, you don't have these like glamorous storefronts and malls and, flashy things, but everything that exists behind walls is just as enriching and colorful and beautiful. It's just not as in your face.
Yeah.
And I really kind of appreciate that subdued nature and the humble nature and the spirit of Iowa. I mean, after the derecho and how people came together and truly didn't ask for help, they just intuitively got in there and got dirty and did what they needed to do. It was a type of spirit that I truly have never experienced in my life. And I thought to my husband, I'm so glad we're raising our children here. I can't imagine a better.
You do learn things differently, and you don't really realize it when you have been immersed in it. I've lived here my entire life. I have probably around 75 first cousins, and we're all local, within an hour of each other. So we're all like, I feel like because we're all here, we're kind of stuck here.
Right.
But I truly don't know that I would go anywhere else. But you sometimes lose that appreciation, especially like in the middle of winter when it's 40 below and you're like, why the F do I live here? But then, a hurricane takes out half of your state, and then you're like, oh, that's why I live here.
And it's really interesting because I come from a big, large family, and you never have to ask how someone's feeling. You just know.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone needs help, you ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really have a hard time getting used to, the struggle for me, is people don't ask for help around here. It's just not something they do. And if you give them help, my God, they're gracious. They feel bad about it. But like when the derecho happened, I said to my husband, I'm like, my goodness, here's this old woman, she lives by herself. She doesn't have running water. She doesn't have electricity. She's not asking for help. Why is that? And my husband was like, people in Iowa, they just have pride and it's not something they do. And so, it really kind of has made me be more diligent and mindful of like actually picking up the phone and being like, okay, so I know you're homeschooling your kids, are you okay?
Yeah.
Whereas like in prior relationships or with my family, I kind of take for granted that people will reach out and call and be like, I'm not okay, and you
Yeah.
just know
Yeah.
to have that conversation here. It's just not as
And after the derecho, and I'm sure you experience this, every single person that you would say, like, so how was your damage? They would all say, oh, we're really lucky. It really wasn't that bad, not as bad as other people. And then you would like see the pictures and they literally lost half their house.
right.
And you're like, well, what? I mean, that's pretty bad.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was on repeat, that people said that. And even one of our committee members, she that's what she said, after we got together, after we could get back online and we had our first meeting, um, and like, how's it going? Is everybody okay? She's like, well, it could have been a lot worse. And then we find out how much damage she had. We're like, dude, you lost your house.
I know. I mean, that is just, if there's a way to tell that story and build a narrative and like bottle it up and just, I mean, that was so beautiful.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
sucked and we're still dealing with it and people are still dealing with it, but just the resilience and that spirit.
Yeah.
God,
I mean, you never want to go through it again, but that's
no,
what it is. And here you are. And yeah, you figure it out. So is your husband still traveling a lot? Like, is that still part of your life?
no, not at all. Not
That's
at all.
awesome.
His corporate offices kind of put him on lockdown. So he manages his projects from home and we're both kind of sharing an office,
Oh,
which is
how's
really
that?
interesting, which is why I'm in a different room. But yeah, no, it's been different and unique and everything. But
How does that working with your husband all day?
it's beautiful because it's really given me a better understanding of how his mind operates.
Oh, wow.
We're so different.
Mm-hmm.
He is like the type of individual when it's 12 o'clock, he knows what he's going to eat and he almost like clocks in mentally and clocks out and comes back.
Yeah, my husband does that shit too.
And I'm like, oh, hamburger. All right, I'll eat a piece and put it down. Like, God only knows if I actually eat a meal, right? So like,
Right.
it's just, we're totally on these different channels and it's kind of awesome everything gets done, but it's just so different how we operate.
Yeah, my husband and I are the exact same way. Polar opposites. He's very put together. I'm a fart in the wind a lot of times. I mean, I'll get it done.
Yeah.
But it'll be sloppy. I'll probably cry.
It's just an artist's mind and an engineering mind, right? Like
Yeah,
that's just
yeah,
yin and yang.
yeah. When my kids were little, I watched my husband get ready for the day. And my biggest fear when the kids were getting older and having to go to school was they were going to be late for school every day if I had to take them. Because I am late for everything, like everything. I mean, even if it doesn't matter, I just am. And I'm working on it, but I will always have to work on it. And so I was like, gosh, they're going to be tardy and late for school and they're going to get like suspended and we're going to get like truancy reports and God, it's going to be so terrible. But I watched my husband getting ready for the day and he literally does the exact same thing in the exact same order every day. And for me, like some days I'm going to brush my teeth first and some days I'm going to get dressed first and some days I'm going to make the bed and some days I'm not. And some days there's breakfast and some days there's coffee, but no, he's literally like, so I had to teach my kids to do it like he does it. Cause I was like, if I'm in charge of getting them ready, they're so screwed.
Right?
I turned them into little robots, like starting at like preschool. It was like, okay, you get out of bed and you do this thing first. And then we managed that. And then we got to, now you make your bed and then now you get dressed. And they were never allowed to switch the order because I watched him do it. And I'm like, that's how he's just roboting. He's not even thinking. And I still can't train myself to do it as many times as I've tried. Absolutely no way. I'm far too gone. But here now we are. And I probably started when the girls were probably 4 and 6, like we're 3 and 5, something really little. And now they're 12 and 14. And sometimes I don't even see them in the morning. They just get themselves ready.
That's awesome.
And I have to, like, I always share that with moms of young kids. I'm like, man, you might not be able to get it together for yourself, but
I'm not a good, yeah, I'm similar in the sense that I'm like, how are you feeling today? And my husband's like, I don't care, get your clothes, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. He
very,
doesn't wake up with feelings.
yeah.
I'm like, I
Not that he
do.
doesn't care, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just
Yeah.
lot more regimented.
Yeah. And sometimes I wish I could be more that way. And then other times I'm grateful that I can pivot, with
Right.
anything. And he doesn't pivot with change well. So I guess, you balance each other. And I always wonder, I just had a conversation earlier today. And she said, well, the world would not work with two people like you in the same house. And I always wonder how like two people with ADHD get married. Like,
Oh my God. I've dated another person with it. And it was just like conversations. We were like, we have no idea like why we started talking
were
or
we talking today? Yeah.
right. I know. Seriously, I'm like a walking textbook of ADHD but yeah.
I already knew.
I mean, what led you on?
I have no
The fact
idea.
that you couldn't even ask a question and we're talking about like vision boards.
Or the fact that I'm like following along right with you. And I'm like, yeah, let's go on this journey.
Yeah.
This is no problem for me. Like this is more helpful, or it's easier for me to follow along. Like I can scroll right along with people.
Oh my God,
I
you're
know a
brilliant.
girl that does some like ADHD coaching for entrepreneurs, and she calls us squirrelpreneurs.
Oh my gosh. Well, Brooke
Yeah.
Fitzgerald, who I know has been a speaker with y'all, she has been helping. And it's been brilliant.
I have heard, you're not the first person to tell me that
Yeah.
Brooke has really gotten people accountable to their calendars or something.
Yeah.
Is kind of what I'm hearing. And I'm like, what is this magic she has?
She just has a magic. She knows how to pull it out of you and really helps you to calm the storm.
Well, she was in real estate too. And I'm convinced
Yeah.
that no one works well in real estate unless you have some level of neurodivergence in your brain. Like
I mean, it's definitely, yeah.
There's no way you could. I mean, I watch one of my good friends, you may know her. Her name's Ainsley Snyder, and she works with Urban Acres.
Yeah.
And she lives in my town. We do a ton of stuff together. And so that's how I know, especially like if we're out to dinner, if we're, grabbing a drink, if we're doing something social, she just has to constantly like check the shiny object. And I'm like, everything changes on her constantly. And there's just no way somebody that has to like be super scheduled could do that job. I don't think.
No, you live on a swivel.
Yeah. And the amount of relationships that you have to have is crazy to me. Like I have never realized how, not just your clients, but like every banker, every mortgage broker, every other realtor, because you have to work with each other on things like it's a lot of information to ping pong around, closing dates changing and every inspector in town, and and then like loving to work with certain people but having those things out of your control a lot of times. So like you love to work with this inspector and this mortgage broker and this banker or whatever, but you don't get to pick. So you have to learn to work with everybody, even the assholes.
Yeah.
Especially the assholes, probably.
Especially the asshole. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a different arena to be in, because I will tell you like what you see on TV and, with some of these shows, like, what is that? Selling Sunset? I refuse to watch it. They always make it seem as though you're just answering the phone. Oh, I just negotiated a deal, or I just put a sign in the yard. I mean, there is so much that goes on behind the scenes that folks don't realize. And I think it's really awesome to bring to light, the profession and have a discussion, but I just wish that it went a little bit further and deeper into what goes on in a transaction. And a lot of times it's just managing two sides, their expectations, to make sure that you're over promising or not over promising and under delivering. Because, oftentimes when it's your own possession and you're so excited about your home, you just have this natural inclination to be like, it's fine, or I fixed it, or it's priced well. And you can imagine that conveyance of information to someone that's buying it is taken in literal form. But we're dealing with someone, in most cases, someone's most important, valuable asset. And you just can't you can't take people's words all the time literally, and you have to have a process that makes sure that you're following
Yeah, you don't even have
guidelines to
time.
protect
You have
yourself.
no time to get mad at people. Like I can't
No,
like you just have to deal with it. In most of our jobs, if somebody, doesn't follow through or they're late on a deadline or something, you can sit there and stew and be all pissed off or whatever.
right.
But in your job, you can't. You just have to be like, okay, this is our new reality. What's next? And this is our new
It's
reality.
just
And what's
very complex problem solving, you
yeah,
know,
yeah. It's
and
yeah.
making sure people's egos and emotions, as much as they're important and I love them, we have to separate it, because at the end of the day, there's banks involved, and US Bank does not care if
Mhm.
you are having a bad day. US Bank needs to tell their board of directors, here are the facts and how they're going to translate to their earnings statement. So we just have to get across the finish line in the most elegant, graceful way possible. And
how do you not want to move every other day though? Looking at awesome houses. Like I'll go search on like whatever people's sites, then you can see the new houses and I'm just like, oh, I want to move every time I go. So how do you do that?
yeah. Have you ever heard of like when people are sometimes artists will live in white boxes? Like it's just too much, you know?
Mhm.
For me, I moved around a lot growing up. And so having a home that I can consistently count on, at least for now, is something that I can take energy away from and move it into something else.
So it just becomes just space like that your other houses. You don't put yourself in them.
Yeah, I mean, I put myself in it from the standpoint of what is this space going to attract? Will someone envision this? I mean, that's kind of where my artistic mind comes in. I go into a space and I think to myself, okay, who is going to be spending their time? What are the moments that are going to be shared? How can I elicit these feelings, these moments, these energies from the next buyer?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so I don't necessarily put myself in those positions because it's just not productive.
Right.
Um, so, I look at that and know it sounds kind of wacky dacky, but like truly that's really what real estate boils down to, is assessing what your brain does to attribute value,
Yeah, that makes
and
sense. Yeah. And it's so like, 2020 started and I was fearful for all my real estate friends at first. Like, oh my
yeah.
gosh, you
Well,
guys are
I thought the world was going to shut down and I was going to be stocking shelves, like for
right.
sure.
Yeah. And then the derecho happened and I thought it was going to get worse, but the housing market here is on fire.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it is fast. Every person I know that lists a house, it is sold in hours most of the time. It is crazy to me how quick it's moving along. And I know a lot of like construction being slowed down is a part of that. And, people moving back home is a part of it. But, we've been contacted several times about, hey, if you're thinking about moving in the next few years, you might want to push your schedule up. And that is like, um, it blows my mind that here we are in the middle of a pandemic, like which industries, and I would not have guessed the real estate industry. I thought you would crash. I thought
Well,
it would.
it's interesting because our society's definition of space, I think, is evolving. And in
Mm,
some neighborhoods and communities, it's evolving differently and faster. And I think the way that we as humans are using our home, it's changing dramatically. And how we place importance on certain things, is also changing. And I think for us, space is the biggest issue right now,
mhm.
depending on how many people are occupying for various different reasons. Some people had two kids homeschooling at the same time while both parents are working from home. Other people are like, I don't need all this space. I want to downsize and I want to travel. This is my like wake up call to go out and live, and just
Yeah.
make my space not as much of a priority because I've been alone for so long. So, I mean, everyone has got their own journey. It's just accelerating people's journeys at a speed that is really interesting. On top of that, we were dealing with an inventory crisis before the pandemic hit. And I think that, this just exacerbates an already prevalent issue, just not having.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that because I remember, like the whole idea of open concept flooring and stuff was huge for the longest time. And I was just reading something the other day that said, people being home so much more, they're putting more walls in their space because they need to separate from
Yeah.
people they're home with all the time. Offices are so much more important than they ever were. Even office space for kids and teenagers, or space in their rooms for it, where we didn't even, all they needed before was a place to do their homework.
Right.
It wasn't the same as it is now. Technology being wired in differently, all things being considered, and upgrading people's homes and stuff. And I never could have imagined that whole open concept thing ever changing. Everybody loved it. Oh, we can
Right.
all fit in the same space and no walls. And now people are like, actually, why don't you go in the other room?
Exactly. And just the thought, like, for example, when I first got into new construction in Iowa, we would always have this conversation about, dining rooms. And we would oftentimes have to, talk to someone who had a dining room about using a leaf in their kitchen table to expand their table into the living or into the family room, because we don't have dining room spaces right now to accompany those like 1990s dining room tables with seat 15. And we're
Right.
like, how often are you using that table? Maybe twice a year. Do you really think it's worth adding like, $40,000 worth of square feet to your home? And oftentimes, the response back would be like, oh no, forget it. Like, we'll just use this open concept, right? Now it's shifting back where people are like, yeah, I want that space because we're not going to be anywhere else besides this table. And it's become so much more important to our family's traditions and our memories. And so I think, maybe you get square feet in that room and you take it away from the bedroom. It's just kind of shifting in
It's
that
weird.
regard.
Yeah, I don't have a dining room in my home, and I wish I did.
Yeah, I don't
It's
have China anymore. Like it's funny. I wonder, it would be interesting to talk to like a wedding planner who deals with like newlyweds that are registering. Like, are they still registering for China? Are they, getting all the stuff that like our parents and our grandparents were very, they place a lot of importance on. I think.
Yeah. It'll go back and forth. Like, it all comes back, just like apparently high-waisted, ill-fitting, wide-legged mom jeans.
Oh God, I know.
I don't know what's happening with that, but I do remember in the early 90s, maybe late 80s. Do you remember when we tight rolled our jeans?
Oh yeah.
And like my parents were wearing boot cut jeans at that point, and we were like, yeah, you can have boot cut, but you have to tight roll them. And I remember tight rolling my mom's jeans all the time, and her being like, I look like an idiot. And so now I'm like looking at my kids, and I'm like, you look like an idiot.
Those mom jeans, I mean, sometimes I don't know how to turn my phone on vibrate. It's like the silence, but it's still going. Sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, it's not really flattering unless you're like 12, And I'm like, I remember looking at my mom and being like, that doesn't look that good back in the day. And now I bought a pair and I'm like, that doesn't look that good,
But gosh darn it, it doesn't dig in when you sit down. So now what am I going to do?
right?
Just wear the
I
big
mean,
sweater.
muffin top it up.
It's fine. I'm so glad I did see something about low rise jeans coming back, and I said, oh, absolutely not. No, nope. I'll get on the trends late, but I will never wear those. Remember the Britney Spears?
Oh, the Christina Aguilera, like they
Oh,
would barely fit above your hip bone.
yes. And if you had a butt crack that went just a millimeter higher, I mean, we knew what everybody's underwear looked like,
Oh,
or if
right.
they, or whatever they were wearing
But
or
those
not
were the
wearing.
days of the lacy camisoles.
Yes.
You'd wear those lacy camisoles and they would cover everything, the
But
little dresser.
it had a built-in bra. That didn't work.
Never worked.
Never
No.
worked. Okay, that went off on some kind of a tangent. I do want to touch on, before we go any further, so you are speaking you're doing a breakout session at Vulnerably You. Tell everybody like what they're going to take away from that session before we go off the rails too far.
Yeah, right. No, I promise it's not gonna be an off the rail session with me. I need to have a plan or this is what happens. Yeah, so I mean, raising two daughters, right? Like I have a new perspective on, what it's like to be a woman and how my experience, moving around to various locations, having been a new girl so many times,
Oh
what that
yeah.
means to truly be authentic versus, not being authentic. And oftentimes when you're not authentic, you often fit in better and ruffle less feathers. So
Mhm.
it's for me, I wanted to come and talk a little bit about my story and how I've been, transformed in a way of I was the, I would say, perfect example of what happens when you try to fit in too much and then you lose your complete identity.
Yeah.
And I'll get into kind of how what my story was and how that happened and whatnot. But um, the wisdom that I was bestowed from that experience is something that I want to share and hopefully acknowledge with my girls, because I think far too often us women we're more uh, sensitive to what others think and how we project, our identity and it's received. And I think oftentimes, we're more concerned about the reception of it rather than how it feels inside.
Yeah, it's so true. And I know I can remember very specifically right before I turned 30, just trying to chameleon too much, trying to be somebody I wasn't, and for me, it was like being professional. It was being, on time, put together, like,
Mhm.
always trying to have that, just that when somebody saw me, they already knew I was worth something. I guess,
Right.
I don't know. It wasn't like there was no conscious thought going into it. But I very clearly remember having the feeling of like, enough with the bullshit. I at that point I'd felt like such a liar. And
Right.
I mean, I didn't set out to be a liar, but because I was constantly trying to be somebody else, I didn't even really have a clue who I was. And
Totally.
I just said, enough with the bullshit. I'm done. I'm done pretending like I want this job. I'm done pretending like I like this industry I was in.
Yeah.
And I literally left a very well-paying job in higher ed to go to beauty school. And I don't think many women realize how many people have a similar story and that they can get like unstuck just by truly taking that like that bullshit away.
Hmm.
Taking the filter off, I guess, is what I'd say. Like,
Right. And I think there's a lot of conversation in this space, and I think it's good conversation.
yeah,
If you want to be in, not you, but like just generally speaking, if you want to be a newscaster, and I'm not saying like go and show up in jeans, because you really want to be able to be professional and you want to fit certain parts, but knowing how much is too much is really, I think, the hardest part for me when in my journey. You want to be able to stand out, but you don't want to be the one person with the mohawk, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
And so what does that look like? How do you be authentic and show up and make sure that you are true to yourself, but you're not also like crying on people's,
yeah.
you know, it's a hard balance.
Well, and there's so much inspiration in everybody's story because I think the one thing that we've learned at U conferences is the more people share pieces of their story, the more other people connect, and everybody feels like they're the only one feeling this way. Like that
Right.
is hands down. Gosh, you hear so many times, you just don't know what I've been going through, and I'm like, actually, I probably do know what you've been going through. I recently had someone just going through a really hard time. And she said, it's been terrible and it's been rough. And I've kind of been in a puddle, in a corner, and I'm just having a hard time getting myself out of it. And I said, you should ask all of your friends how many times they've been in a puddle this month, because we all have, and none of us, and I don't think it's necessarily good or bad that we're not talking about it, but like I, talking about it, doing something about it, whatever. But yeah, everybody's going through that. And
Right.
I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about my puddle times, but because I'm kind of at a point where I'm getting better about getting out of it. But
Mhm.
sometimes I do need to know I'm not the only one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because, you share fellowship with folks that can relate. And
Yeah.
it's just that touch point of knowing that you're not alone,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
And yeah, you do. Because otherwise you just feel like, I always call it the lonely island of failure.
Right. But I think in my generation and of growing up, our first jobs, like we were told that the boilerplate was always like fake it till you make it.
Hmm.
And we get that ingrained to us, especially in sales for so long.
Yeah.
I would have this padfolio that was like beautiful and leather, and I'd walk around and the damn thing was empty. And so, you're showing up and you're like, here's my Rolodex of people that it's just, it gets to be, you get to a place where you're just like, what in the fuck am I doing? You're not really showing up. Now, granted, I don't think it's a good idea to show up and be like, this is empty. You're my first client. But, I think being honest about yourself and honest about who you are and what you're setting out to do and your gifts that you can provide to the table, and just making sure that you are who you are is the best thing you can do. I mean, I know this sounds kind of morbid and weird, but like the best thing that ever happened to me was when my grandma died. Like, she always used to worry about everyone and what they would think. And like, she had plastic over her entire couch, and you couldn't leave your house until you had like a pound of Aquanet in your hair. I mean, even going to the grocery store, you had to look like $1,000,000.
Right.
And the people that came to her funeral and got up and spoke were like, she was a damn good card player. She had a mouth on her. Not one person mentioned that she was clean. Not one person mentioned like, she had a Yonkers card with like the latest and greatest outfit. Like, no one gave a shit, right? Like, we put so much emphasis on what everyone thinks. No one gives a shit.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. They're just not paying that close of attention.
And that's the thing. Like, I often have to remind myself, unless a person's going to get up and speak at my damn funeral, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Well, when people always, we women especially, we live in a really space of being very apologetic for everything. We apologize before we speak. We ask permission before we speak. And I do a lot of coaching with people on social media, and a lot of people, kind of drop off of the planet on social media with their business, and they're like, so should I, kind of announce that, yeah, I'm back to work and I'm here? And I'm like, no, just get back to work. No, nobody even noticed you were gone. No,
Right.
nobody said, oh, hey, Ashley hasn't been posting about her real estate business for a month. Where has she been? No, nope. They didn't even notice. You just jump back in like you've been doing it the whole time. And if you're lucky, then and you do it right and you do it well, people, they won't even remember that time that you fell off the planet or whatever. And I think, that's the other thing. We just do not give ourselves very much grace for things that, are just human. And
It's terrifying. I mean, it's terrifying to be in a place where, you want to command authority, you want to command knowledge, respect, and just especially if you're someone in finance or someone in medicine, you really truly want to have a level of professionalism where you're showing up and you're not being overly vulnerable or explaining your flaws. And so, that's been hard for me a lot, because I don't necessarily want people to think like, oh, she's got ADHD, she's not capable. Oh, she swears, or she does this or that, or she drives like, a bat out of hell. Like, she's probably not good at this, that, or the other thing. And that is difficult. And I will be the first to admit, I struggle with that completely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I don't want to be discredited. And there's going to be people that will, but at the end of the day, like, your vibe attracts your tribe. And if me being happier by just trying to follow what is ingrained in me naturally, I'm going to hopefully attract people that appreciate that. And
yeah. What got you into, like, what made you want to do any public speaking whatsoever? What?
So I took a class over, I was going to say like over the pandemic, over, when we were all locked down. I follow this gal, her name's Jessica Zweig, and she founded Simply Be, which is a PR agency, and she did something on branding. And this class that I took with her it was called, I think, Owning Your Shit.
Oh, okay.
And basically like your brand and how to present it to the world. And I think that, branding is really an interesting topic, and I can go off on a huge tangent with that. But I just want to share my experience, with trying to figure out like the best way to explain who you are and tell a story and be vulnerable and give nuggets of knowledge so that, you're authentic and you're also bringing value to others.
Yeah. I mean, you lose so much in words, like in written words. You can, you lose inflection. People could go and, see that you were speaking on this topic at the conference and read what you wrote and be like, yeah, I'm interested in that, or I'm not. And it will completely change once they listen to this podcast, and it will completely change when they see you on stage. because the connection is, it's just one more, dimension of, one more sense involved in seeing somebody's personality. There was a book, it's called Positive Intelligence, by Shirzad Shamin, and I like live and die by what this book is taught now. But when it was first recommended to me, I don't read many books. I listen to them. So I go to listen to it. This guy's like Middle Eastern. He doesn't have a super thick accent, but enough that, so I don't know about you, but when I listen to books, I listen to them on like 1.5 or 2 speed.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
yeah, like I'm getting,
If I can't get through it, it's done.
yeah, yeah. If I can't get through a sentence, so I make them go fast and then I can process it. Well, I couldn't understand this guy at all, at the speed I need to listen to. So I just pushed the book aside. But I heard him speak on stage. He was a keynote speaker at an event I went to. And like that connection was like, oh, I want to know everything this man teaches. This is powerful. And, that's why I think like these things are important. And people, and why I ask about public speaking is because sometimes people are like, well, I mean, you do real estate. What does it matter if you're empowering other women on a women's empowerment stage or not? But like, it goes so much further than that. The connections that you make once you have somebody's undivided attention, and whatever, people will be so much more interested in introducing you to people, or like following your page on Facebook, or calling you when they have a question about real estate, or whatever the case may be, because now they understand who you are in a really intimate way. And so it's important, I think. And then,
I mean, I'm kind of one of those weirdos that, like, to me, I define wealth by the amount of connections that I have in my life and the amount of people that I share stories with. I mean, if if I live in a box and I drive like a beat up car, like that to me is more, it doesn't matter. It's minutia. Like I would rather have important people in my life. And so I feel like this is kind of a selfish thing for me, where I'm like, if I can share my story and make that many more connections and help that many people, like to me, it's bringing me wealth in a way. And I know that's like kind of weird to share, like I'm being selfish,
no,
but
I think it's valid. And I think a lot of people have that feeling, but they don't want to say that out loud because it sounds weird and egotistical. But
yeah,
but it's really,
I'm
it's
not
really,
there to like, I'm not there to self-promote any. I have zero interest in that. Like, I just want people to come up and say like, I went through a similar experience, or thank you, your experience helped me realize that I need to change mine. Like, I just love having those types of conversations and
yeah.
connecting with people.
Yeah, it is. And, part of the reason we're doing this, we did this conference and that it's evolved the way that it is that every conference we've ever been to, and it's not a bad thing necessarily, but it was organized for men and for the way that they work and operate. And you wouldn't catch them like telling their intimate stories about overcoming things. And maybe they are doing more of that now, and maybe there'll be more of it. But I love that women are finally able to like speak up and say, nope, it's just really important that we get to know each other, and that we know each other, and that then we can, see what that future holds between that relationship and that community.
Yeah.
And I finally feel like we don't have to apologize for that anymore.
And I thank you for giving us a space to do it. I mean, that's
Yes.
awesome that you're giving us this platform to be able to share our stories. I mean, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this.
That's
And it might
awesome.
be the last. I might completely bomb it. But in a way,
Good.
this is some form of catharsis, I suppose.
Yeah. And that's the whole, it is hard to get on a stage. I've been doing public speaking for years, and I'm fairly good at it, but it is hard to get on a stage, and it is hard to get people to listen to you, especially those first few times. And so we try so hard to balance our speaker audience by like, people that have really very little experience and people that have a ton, because I don't know. I think it's important to give people a shot, and let you explore it. What if you never do it again? So what? But what if it becomes like the side hustle you always needed? I don't know. Like, who knows?
God. No, my husband thinks I'm completely lost in my, like, he's like, why are you doing this? But it's just a
It'll be
form.
so good. Don't worry.
Yeah.
It'll be
But
so good.
I mean, I'm a firm believer to try something new at least once in your life. And this is something I've always wanted to do. And I've got a pretty awesome story to share. And, if you're like, that girl's weird and that was wasting my time, I hope that's not the case, but
I doubt it. You have enough of a good personality. People will people will do that. So I'll wrap this up. Thank you so much for being a
Thank
part
you
of
for
this. Thanks for
having me.
chatting with me. I loved getting to know you. Like I said, I don't really, we must not have connected a ton that day because
No, I was in a weird headspace. So yeah, I was kind of doing my vision board, like, you know,
super creepy like.
yeah.
Oh, that's funny. But I'm glad we got to know each other, and I'm glad that our audience does too. So I believe your session is in the morning. I think it's the one of the first breakout sessions, so people will be
So
able
my
to.
goal is not to get people to leave immediately. Stick
You
around.
can't. No, there's COVID. You can't leave the room. You have to sit there and
Yeah,
it's
we're
not it's
locking the
not
doors.
yeah, it's not like the old times where, like, in a lot of conferences people could just kind of up and mingle or move their chair. No, 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 no. You've got to sit there. And then of course we'll have, just a couple hundred people online. No big deal.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so fun. And I'm excited that you'll be there. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And in the description of this, wherever we put it, people will have ways to get a hold of you there too.
For sure.
All right. I will see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I got to hit the buttons now. Gosh, I always forget.